to Advocacy, where ideas take shape, thoughts find depth, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. She's an author as well as psychotherapist and the author of America in Therapy, no other than Miss Phyllis Leavitt.
Hi, Daniel, and thank you for having me here with you today.
Welcome, welcome, Miss Phyllis. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yeah, I've been a psychotherapist for over 35 years. I've always been a writer. I wrote two books originally, A Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire, that are about my own healing journey and more of a spiritual bent to that journey. Um, but my latest book is America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis, because out of all of my own personal recovery work and so many years working with hundreds of clients, families, individual adults, children, and couples, it became really clear to me that our family systems are running on all levels, not just in our homes, but in our communities, in our schools, in our businesses, and in our governing bodies that we operate on either healthy or unhealthy family dynamics. And we affect the people around us with the dynamics that we engage in. And we often bring our unhealed wounds as well as our strengths and gifts to our adult relationships in all of those areas. So I wrote American Therapy as a way to share what I've learned about how we could bring healing on a psychological level to some of the very difficult dynamics going on in our country. That's kind of the short version.
The short version, indeed, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Phyllis.
Thank you.
And today, let's talk about the writing process of America in Therapy. The title America in Therapy is powerful metaphor. What was the catalytic moment or observation that made you see the nation's crisis through the lens of therapeutic process?
Yeah, and there's probably more than one moment, but I think the moment I'll share is as I began to realize that when people are hurt and when they have trauma that's unhealed, they become symptomatic and it carries over into their adult relationships for the most part. For more or less deleterious ways, either to themselves or other people, and not through any fault of their own. It's like if you have a broken leg, you're going to have pain and you're going to limp. If you have a broken heart, you're going to have emotional pain and your relationship life is probably going to suffer in some way. And it became really clear to me that people are being traumatized in their homes, in their communities, in their nations, all over the world. They're traumatized by war, they're traumatized by poverty, they're traumatized by discrimination and exploitation, to name some of the big things that we face today. And that people will become symptomatic and then they will re express some of their symptoms in the world around them. And I think that's a lot of what's going on in the world today, that we have a lot of people who are really hurting that are acting out their pain in ways that are not constructive and sometimes very injurious to themselves and other people. And I thought, what if we brought the principles of healing to a country and take it out? The original title for my book was going to be Out of the Office and Into the World. How do we take what we've learned in our psychotherapy offices and bring it to national and international conversation for the sake of healing? Not for the sake of pointing fingers or blaming or shaming or retribution, but how can we bring the healing that we know possible to broader levels of society? So that
How
was,
do you,
yeah.
How do you respond to immediate critique that comparing a nation to individual in need of therapy is an oversimplification?
If someone were to say that were an oversimplification,
Yes.
yeah, I think what I would say is it's one lens on what's happening. I'm not an economist. I'm not an environmentalist. Um, I'm not a politician. There are many skills and areas of expertise that I don't have. So I'm only talking from a psychological point of view. I'm not saying it's the whole picture. I'm saying it's a critically missing piece of the puzzle, and I want to add that into the puzzle. So I don't think it's naive, and I don't think it's short sighted. I think it's just a really essential missing piece. For instance, if you went to a doctor because you had some kind of illness, you might require medical treatment that the ordinary layperson couldn't provide. But the doctor might also say you need to go see a nutritionist because your diet is really impacting your health. So I'll call myself the nutritionist for mental health.
Hmm. And diagnosing the nation's illnesses is a brave task. What are the core presenting problems you identify, and how did you differentiate between symptoms and root causes?
Yeah, I think they're intimately connected, but they can be sort of separated out and identified. So the model that I've used to talk about is everything that I've learned about family dynamics in a family of origin. So in a relatively healthy family, and nobody does it perfectly in their family, but in a relatively healthy family, you're safe. You're not going to be beaten. You're not going to be molested. You're not going to be starved. You're not going to be left out in the cold. In a relatively healthy family, people talk about their disagreements without injuring one another, and they have some kind of commitment to working out their problems, the best they can. In a relatively healthy family, there's love and support for everyone. Everybody is fed, everybody is housed. You're encouraged to be your best self. Um, our differences are honored. One child might want to be an athlete, one might want to be a doctor, and no one is forced to be someone who they're not. And the big commitment, I think, of a healthy family is really a commitment to nonviolent communication and conflict resolution. Because when people are safe, then the rest of what we need as individuals to flower is much more possible. When people are not safe, they can't be their best selves. They're on the defensive. They're looking for a way just to protect themselves or get away. And that takes up most of their energy. So, in an unhealthy family or an abusive family, I have a lot of echo, but I'll keep talking. In an
Yes.
unhealthy or an abusive family, you have people who are wielding power in destructive ways. You can't have a voice. You can't protect or defend yourself if you're being hurt. You might be thrown out. You might be um, shamed. You might be starved. You might be molested. You might be beaten. Or it might be more subtle. You might just be getting emotional messages that you're not worth anything, that you're not wanted, that your parents wish you had never been born and they don't want you. Or it can just be you're fat, you're lazy, you're ugly. These are all signs of not treating people in a healthy way, and they produce symptoms. So when people are hurt, especially by the people they depend on, they become symptomatic. They shut down, they become aggressive, they become addicted, they become people pleasers, they become workaholics, they become highly anxious, they might have panic attacks, or they're depressed. And then what happens in an unhealthy family is that then the victims of mistreatment are blamed for their symptoms. Well, he's lazy, rather than he really can't concentrate in school because he's a nervous wreck because he's afraid he's going to get hit when he gets home. Um, so in an unhealthy family, people are then blamed for their symptoms, and then they don't have any chance to heal. One of the big um, symptoms in an unhealthy family is that if you try to get help or go outside the family system to speak truth and say, this is what's going on in my home and it's not good, my brother's being molested or my sister's being beaten or my mom, has a black eye, often you're then treated even worse for telling. So all the things that I'm saying right now, you can see happening on a societal level to some extent. People who are trying to have a voice of exposing what's not working well in our societies and in our communities are often targeted for further abuse, tear gassed, locked up, not allowed to have a voice, discriminated against, unjustly jailed. These are all symptoms and behaviors of unhealthy families. And again, I say this, the point is not to point fingers, but the point is, how do we heal? How do we break this cycle? How do we bring healthy family dynamics to our larger communities, our larger institutions, and our government, the family of America? And I call it the family of America.
Miss Phyllis, were there any historical events or psychological studies you discovered during your research that fundamentally changed your initial thesis or offered a surprising key to the healing?
I don't know if there was anything super surprising, but I did a lot of research because some of the things that I found actually weren't surprising, but it were statistics that I wasn't aware of. For instance, that way more than 50% of the incarcerated people in America today are victims of unhealed child trauma or abuse. And so they're people who never got a chance to heal, never got a place to be safe or be believed or protected. And one of their symptoms was to act out societally. Is that right? No. Not everybody who's hurt as a child becomes a criminal. However, it's also true that many people who were hurt as children and didn't get a chance to be safe or to heal do behave in inappropriate and destructive ways because that's what they've learned. And while certain people may need to be restrained, for instance, what if we helped people who were incarcerated? What if we treated them for their unhealed child abuse? What if we really created a society that wanted them to thrive when they got out of prison, and help them go back to communities that were healing, go back to jobs, go back to a place where they had self esteem and felt valued? Because these are the things that people need to thrive. And I'll say this, I've said this many times and I'll say it again because I don't think it's common knowledge. I've worked with hundreds of people, many of whom have had very significant child abuse and neglect. Even though every person has a different story and a different set of circumstances, and maybe they were born with a different nature, every single injury that they've come to heal in therapy can be traced back to the same thing, which is an injury to love and safe belonging. All of our worst symptoms come from injuries to love and safe belonging. And some people have never felt loved and they've never felt safe and they're highly symptomatic. And it's not their fault. It's the natural outcome from being treated terribly by other human beings, and especially those they depend on. And so the cure is reintroducing love and safe belonging. And of course, there's many other things that are involved in helping people heal, but that's the bottom line.
The bottom line indeed, so Miss Phyllis. Can you walk us through the new approach to hope and healing? What does the first season of America's therapy look like in practical terms?
Yeah. Well, it starts where any good therapy starts is we really have a safe place to talk about everything that's bothering us. And that can be that I'm safe to tell you the terrible things that have happened to me or the hurtful things that have happened to me. And I'm also safe to say the things that I've done that I'm not proud of, that I feel badly about, where maybe I've hurt someone else. Maybe I've excluded somebody else or hurt their feelings or been even more, destructive toward other people than I typically might want to say because I'm ashamed or because I'm afraid you might judge me. So in a non-judgmental environment that's dedicated to healing, we talk about our history, we talk about our conditioning. If it were America in therapy, we talk about our origin. Who came here and settled this country? What were they fleeing in terms of war or poverty or discrimination or religious persecution? What did we then do to some of the people who lived here, the Native Americans, or the people that we brought over as slaves? So we have both a history of our own traumas, and we have a history of the traumas we've also delivered to other people. And then we work with the belief structure underneath that. What did we believe about ourselves as a result of what we've experienced? And I'm not trying to exclude here the good things. You know, many good people came to America, or many people who even, came from war and poverty and discrimination did wonderful things when they came here. So, how can we heal our wounds and capitalize on our strengths? And that's really the heart of any good therapy. We're in a non judgmental environment. We get to the roots of what caused the problems that we're suffering from now. We rework our belief structure because for most people, when they're hurt or they have been hurtful, they're believing negative things about themselves. I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. I'm not enough. I have no voice. I'm powerless. I deserve the bad things that happened to me. It was my fault. That kind of thing. And good therapy reworks our beliefs. So, what if we were reworking our beliefs about ourselves as a country? Um, and what would that look like? And I'll just say this real quickly, that when people have a chance to, in a safe environment where they're not judged, process everything, what happened to them and who they've been with other people, they inevitably become more loving, more cooperative, more accepting, and more constructive in their personal lives. And that's what will happen with America. If America was in therapy, and I know this sounds like pie in the sky, it's very complicated what we're dealing with here. And we're dealing with a lot of wounding that is keeping on going on. So we have more and more people who are injured. But the basic bottom line is when people have a chance to heal, they become more safely relational with themselves and other people. And that's really the hope of America in therapy, is that we could heal enough of our own wounds as individuals and as a collective that we would actually want to treat each other well. We would not want to go to war. We would not want to marginalize certain people and target them for abuse or neglect or blame and shame or injustice. That we would actually really want to take care of our brother and sister human beings the way we want to be taken care of in our own lives.
How does your framework address the inherent tension between the need for justice and the need of reconciliation?
I'm sorry, what was the last word? The need for what?
Need for reconciliation.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that they go together. And the way that I would say it is, if we really want to talk about justice, then I think we have to look at healing the family. So you can have a child that sets fire to the house, and something obviously has to happen. That child is a danger to their family and maybe to their community because their rage or their pain or their feelings of disconnection have set them up to do things that are very, very dangerous, right? But if you just look at that child and you say, well, how do we exact justice for that child who set fire to their house and burned it down? I think we're looking in the wrong place. We have to look at what happened to that child that made them feel so disconnected. Why did they want to burn the house down? What was their pain? What was their anger? Did they have enough food? Were they bullied at school? Were they mistreated by their parents or their siblings? Were they a race that got discriminated against? And so every time they stepped out their door, somebody called them a name or looked at them with disgust or hatred. So I think we have to look at the larger family system. If we want to talk about justice, let's talk about how do we eliminate the need for putting so many people in jail? How do we eliminate the need for having so much crime? And that's one of the things that really makes me sad in our country today is like it's all about law and order, but how about making a family dynamic in the family of America that actually reduces the need for people to commit crimes or the desire for them to act out on themselves and other people. So I think when we talk about justice, I think we have to talk about human rights. I think we have to talk about treating each other the way we want to be treated. I don't know anyone who wants to have their child taken away from them and put in a cage. I don't know anyone who would actually want to be taken away from their own country. Most people want to stay home. They want to be safe in their own homes with their own communities and their own like minded people around them or the people that they've grown up with. People only flee, for instance, when they're not safe where they are. So I
Yes.
think we have to look at those larger family dynamics. I'm saying a lot in a short amount of time, but I hope you get the gist of what I'm saying.
Yes, indeed. And Miss Phyllis, if the nation truly embraced these therapeutic process, what would be healthier America look and feel like on one generation?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we would see is that people of very different orientations, different belief systems, different races, different religions, different genders, different political views, different ideological backgrounds would sit down at the table together and listen to each other. That's one of the first things you do, like in family therapy or couples therapy, for instance, is we help people listen to each other the way they want to be heard. We all want to be heard. The trouble is, many of us have not been taught how to listen. We would teach people how to talk the way they want to be spoken to. I don't know anyone who wants to be yelled at and called names and vilified. And yet, we see this happening all the time on the largest political levels and in communities and in workplaces, in houses of worship, even. So we would start with basic, safe communication. And that's really the heart of America in therapy. It's the starting place. And there are many things to build up on top of that. But the starting place is a commitment to nonviolence, physical nonviolence, sexual nonviolence, emotional nonviolence, and verbal nonviolence, and a real commitment to listening to each other with the goal of coming to some kind of agreement instead of I win and you lose. The win lose dynamic that we're operating on right now is actually killing many, many people all over the world and in this country today.
Miss Phyllis, what has been the most surprising or helpful response you received for someone who has read your book or heard your thesis?
Yeah, um, I'd say two things. One is I've done a lot of podcasts, and I've just been so gratified at the wonderful response I've gotten to the ideas that I put out into the world about healing rather than about who's right and who's wrong and how to win this argument. So that's one thing. And then the other one is just a very specific personal example of someone who read my book who really didn't have trauma in their background, and most people have some, but this person really didn't have any. And she was amazed at what she learned because she really didn't know anything about trauma in families and the effect of trauma, the lasting effect of trauma on people. And so it was like such an eye opener for her. And in the big picture, I think many people, whether they've had trauma or not, really don't have exposure to what psychology has to offer about what we've learned about the roots of violence and what we've learned about what helps break the cycle. And so that's my hope, is that my book is a place to begin an education, a psychological education that could help us build both compassion and better boundaries with our personal relations.
Better boundaries indeed. And Miss Phyllis, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast law 101 and mental health 101, love letters in third season, and movie 101 review and music 101 in fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Phyllis, finally, what is your motivation or invitation to readers? Is it a goal of the book to inform, to provoke, to equip, or to inspire a movement?
Both, all of the above. My motivation is that, you know, being able to heal some of what happened to me changed my life. Um, and what I've learned as a psychotherapist, working with hundreds of people over the years, um, I feel I want to give that to everyone. I want to give the what I've gotten back. And that's the big thing that I see. When people have a chance to heal, they want to give back what they've gotten. And the more we give back, the more we bring healing to larger and larger communities of people. I would love to see a world in which all children everywhere feel safe and wanted and provided for. Excuse me.
Miss Phyllis Leavitt, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Hoping for more and more empowering books like this to come. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books, most especially America in Therapy?
Thank you so much.
Yes, so where do people can buy your book, Miss Phyllis, or books?
You can buy my book wherever books are sold: Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Goodreads, Books a Million. Wherever books are sold, you can find it in paperback and in Kindle. And you can go to my website, which is www.phyllisleva.com. You can buy them there. And I'm on all the social media. And if you sign in for my newsletter on my website, you will be given 2 free PDFs on conflict type and conflict resolution, because I really feel like addressing conflict in this world is our number one priority.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Phyllis. You love it because we support her for sure. More and more empowering advocacy like this to come, and more empowering books like this to come. So, Miss Phyllis, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been a pleasure and an honor to talk with you. Thank you so much.
More to come, people. See you soon.